Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hill, as you know, there were years of history indicating that airplanes would be used as a tool of terrorism. And yet you state on page 30, and I'll quote here, "Our review to date has found no indications that prior to September 11th, analysts in the intelligence community were cataloging information regarding the use of airplanes as weapons, as a terrorist tactic, sending requirements to collectors to look for additional information on this threat, or considering the likelihood that bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, or other terrorist groups would attack the United States or U.S. interests in this way." That is a remarkable statement, given the history going back, I believe, to 1994 at least.
Right.
And my question to begin with is, when you ask the intelligence community why this was the case, why they didn't catalog this information regarding the use of planes as weapons or consider the likelihood that they would be used as terrorist tools, what was the response of the intelligence community when you asked them why?
Well, I think a couple of things. They would probably say to that question, and we've spoken to many people over there and gotten, opinions and reactions on this. You have to understand the reason we have been able to catalog all these instances is because one of the things we did was ask the community to go back and find anything that related to aircraft as weapons. So we went back and consolidated and went through their databases to pull it all out so you could see it all together. And I don't believe that had been done, obviously, before we focused on it, given September 11th. But so one, it's not been all pulled together for them to see it, all other than piecemeal over time. Secondly, I think what they will tell you on almost many of these things in the terrorism field is that they were overwhelmed. The people who were looking at Al-Qaeda and bin Laden will complain to you about resources, about the amount of information that was coming in. They were overwhelmed by almost a flood of information because, as you can see from our statement, there's a lot of reporting in there just on these topics. And of course, that reporting is but a small amount of the overall amount of reporting that the community deals with. So I think the reason they would give you that they had not done that was that it was spread out over time. They were overwhelmed by resources and other priorities, and they were overwhelmed by the amount of information they were getting and dealing with the responses to other areas.
What is so hard to swallow, however, is how anything could be a higher priority than this. And for you to state that the intelligence community was not considering the likelihood that bin Laden, Al-Qaeda would attack the United States in this way is, of course, exactly the kind of thing we've got to address in this inquiry. In your testimony, and also from the victims' families, we have heard about the failure to place Khalid al-Midhar and Nawaf al-Hazami. And by the way, Mr. Hazami is listed in the phone book in San Diego, I gather,
I'm aware of that.
on a watch list that would have prevented their entry into the United States. I offered an amendment on the intelligence bill this year to create a terrorist tracking system that would help ensure that this information would finally actually get shared to everybody in the intelligence area, everybody in the law enforcement area, and would actually get to local law enforcement officials. In your view, to make this kind of system effective, what sort of policies need to be included so that finally we can respond to what Mr. Push has asked for, and that is to have a system that on an ongoing basis makes as a top priority tracking the most dangerous individuals who threaten this country?
Well, I think part of it is you have to get people's attention. I mean, you have to get people focused on the need to do that. People in the system, in the agencies, in the group. that is working on those issues. I mean, in this case, and we will, we're going to go into that particular case in much more detail when we present our testimony or statement on the hijackers that would relate to the case you're talking about. So we will go into it in a lot more detail and tell you what we've heard from people who were handling that information at the time and why it slipped by them. But I think part of what you will hear again was you may hear things, everything from they had too many things to do, it wasn't considered that significant, they were overwhelmed, and it was simply a mistake. They made a mistake.
Chairman, my time has expired. I would only want to add one last point with respect to where I think we are in terms of our inquiry. As we all know, there are many, both on this committee and off, who think that essentially this committee ought to punt to an independent effort. I'm of the view that the bar is very, very high now in terms of establishing the credibility of this effort and to show that we're capable of attacking these fundamental problems. This is not something that's going to be solved by just moving the boxes around on the organizational charts and people going up with pointers and saying the problem is solved. So I think Ms. Hill has helped us with the families get off to a good start, and I look forward to working with my colleagues.